Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about the wave of alarm as it's being portrayed among career prosecutors at Donald Trump's blatant orders to the Department of Justice and Pam Bondi to manufacture, at least there's no evidence that they actually have cases to bring, but to manufacture charges against his enemies, identified as Letitia James, identified as Adam Schiff, people and whom he says in all caps in a message to Bondi, there must be justice. And why is that? Because these people impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times. Okay, I'm sometimes at some quandary at how to categorize these various abuses of the Constitution, and particularly as they concern the Department of Justice. They run the gamut. Let me just say, my Substack goes into this more today. We are at rock bottom. There is nothing worse. There's nothing worse in the first place in general than political pressure to bring a prosecution in the absence of evidence. It is completely sacrosanct, completely axiomatic, completely defining of the prosecutor's job of doing justice without fear or favor, and completely memorialized in the U.S. Attorney's Manual as well as the Constitution. It's part of due process. You may not ever bring a case that you don't have the evidence for. The principles of prosecution lay this out more plainly, but it is the sort of ultimate dereliction of a prosecutor. Anyone in any office who purported to do it should be fired immediately, would absolutely be held in contempt by all his colleagues. This is the worst, except we're at rock bottom, but the bottom opens up to a yet new rock bottom, because the very worst is when you do that in order to take political revenge against the president's enemies. So it's not simply the absolute nightmare and complete dereliction of duty of bringing a case against a person who's presumed innocent under the Constitution. The Kafkaesque nightmare for James or Schiff, is completely beyond the pale. But to bring those without evidence, and it's blatant here, this is what Trump insists. And he says we have to do it quickly. So they've now canvassed different prosecutors. I was out of the box very quickly saying, this is beyond bad. This is the ultimate nightmare. And it really is. There's a quote in the Washington Post by a woman who was a U.S. attorney back in 2006, when there was a bona fide scandal that resulted in the resignation of the attorney general, just because there was some suggestion that some prosecutions, possibly with valid evidence, had been taken or extorted by political pressure from the White House or senators going to the White House. Bad, really bad. This is 50 times worse. As she said there, having personal vindictiveness steer prosecutions. You see that seeping down the ranks of the Justice Department, and there appears to be no bottom. So his point, Trump says they are guilty as hell. Excuse me. Then where is the evidence that the U.S. attorney, Trump's nominee, by the way, and his first assistant says there isn't evidence and they got fired, it is an absolute assault on justice without fear or favor. And this follow through now that he's just done, where he's basically this strange email / social media message to Bondi to say, do it fast now. It's deeply nauseating to any professional of the Department of Justice. It's also, by the way, imbecilic. When these cases are brought, there will be screaming proof that this wasn't done for the facts, and in fact, the evidence will probably be dubious, even if they can slam it by a grand jury. But it was actually done for what the law calls a constitutional violation of selective prosecution. It's just plain. I mean, the outright, we have to do it because they impeached me and indicted me, and they're all sort of handled together, etc. So I try to think of what could be going on now within the Department of Justice, the message that the firing of Siebert has brought, the consequences for U.S. attorneys and individual offices for their consideration of cases against the bad guys in Trump's view. And by the way, even if it's quite possible, they're investigating someone whom Trump loathes and they actually have a case. You shouldn't do it for the reason that Trump said. Indeed, Trump shouldn't be within 20 miles of telling them anything. This is their professional judgment. But okay, if they breach it, it's one thing. If they don't reach it, and they say, and obviously they pushed hard, right? And Siebert looked hard. If they don't reach it, the idea that somehow they should bring it anyway, and the failure to do it is a firing offense. You can maybe hear it in my tone, but I'm just here to tell you that it doesn't get worse than that. It was terrible what they did with Mayor Adams in New York, but there was a good case against him that they forced them to dump. Bad. But a bad case against a political enemy that you force someone to bring in the absence of evidence is the complete, utter bedrock corruption of the Department of Justice, and how it even limps along now, knowing that that's the way things are organized within the Department of Justice, is really perplexing. In the Eastern District of Virginia, I've worked in that office, by the way, very professional office, very buttoned down, do a lot of big defense cases. The forced resignation of Siebert, it's reported, and I can't imagine it could be anything else, set off huge concern. What are prosecutors supposed to think now? Is it somehow their obligation to bring cases against Trump enemies, whether they are there or not? How do you do that? How do you stand up in front of a court and say someone's guilty when you don't have the evidence? You're lying. And that's even leaving aside your own personal sense of integrity and the fact that people went there to do justice, meaning to bring cases against guilty persons that the facts and the law support, and not to bring them. Honestly, the highest duty of a federal prosecutor is not to bring a case that is not righteous and not valid. It is, it goes hand in hand with the axiom, better that 10 guilty people go free than that one innocent is actually convicted. And when that innocent is known to be innocent, it's not just a mistake, but known to be innocent in the sense of you don't have the evidence against them, but known to be an enemy of the president, whom the president is saying, go prosecute that person. notwithstanding the your knowledge of his innocence, there could be no deeper corruption, no greater shame, no more complete dereliction of the mission of the Department of Justice than this. So, we've had a series of assaults against the Constitution in the last 8 months. All bad, all worrisome in the aggregate, sometimes individually, from the standpoint of a professional Department of Justice and everything it stands for. A command by the president to prosecute enemies without regard to the evidence. He actually said, as to James, I haven't really followed it very closely, but she looks guilty to me. Like of what? I think he's thinking about mortgage fraud, and we actually know that the facts don't bear it out. And it's just a bullshit charge brought by his henchman on the mortgage fraud side, Polkey. It's not there. It's not even a close call. That is the worst, the saddest, and the most repugnant day that the Department of Justice can have. And where they go from here, what other U.S. attorneys do, what assistants do to when they stand up in court and say, Jane Smith for the Department of Justice, a place that now prosecutes political enemies and lives to actually effectuate political hit jobs against people who, by the way, have only acted to do their jobs in the public interest. Adam Schiff leading the impeachment, the righteous impeachment and everything he had to say, Letitia James. These are not people, whatever Trump says, who, were off on some kind of detour. I mean, they did their jobs. So we're talking about an ultimate assault on the Department of Justice, and all it stands for. It in itself is irreconcilable with with the Justice Department's credo and longstanding practice, whatever else happens, and then what it means going forward for the future and investigating cases in the political sphere, including Trump's enemies, make sure heads spin. This is a really, really foul development and dark day for the DOJ. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.